In 2019, a man named Tyler was driving across the state late at night when heavy rain forced him to stop at an old roadside motel. The place looked abandoned. Half the lights didn't work, and the parking lot was completely empty except for one black car near the back of the building. Tyler almost kept driving, but the storm was getting worse, so he checked in. The receptionist barely looked at him while handing over the room key, then quietly said, "If you hear knocking tonight, don't open the door." Tyler laughed nervously. At first, the room seemed normal. Old furniture, weak lights, a small television near the bed. Nothing unusual. Until around 2:13 a.m. Tyler woke up after hearing 3 slow knocks on the door. Knock, knock, knock. He stayed still, waiting. Then, another 3 knocks, this time louder. Tyler walked toward the door and looked through the peephole. Nobody there. The hallway was empty. But then, he noticed something strange. The motel security camera above the hallway was moving, slowly turning toward his room, almost like someone was controlling it. Tyler stepped away from the door, and that's when the television suddenly turned on by itself. Static filled the screen. Then the image changed. It showed the motel hallway outside his room. Live camera footage. Tyler stared at the screen in confusion, because the camera showed someone standing directly behind his door. Tall, motionless, its face hidden in darkness. Tyler immediately looked through the peephole again. The hallway was still empty, but on the television, the figure was now closer, almost touching the door. Then the knocking started again. Louder, faster, bang, bang, bang. Tyler backed away in panic, and suddenly, the television screen switched one final time. Now it showed his room from above, like another hidden camera was watching him, and standing directly behind Tyler was the same dark figure from the hallway. Tyler turned around instantly. Nothing there. But when he looked back at the television, the figure was gone. The screen returned to static. The knocking stopped, and the motel became completely silent again. The next morning, Tyler rushed to the front desk and asked the receptionist about the cameras. The old man looked confused, then quietly said, "There are no security cameras here." And when Tyler checked outside before leaving, the black car in the parking lot was gone. But deep scratches covered the door to his room, like someone had been trying to get inside all night. Around midnight, a taxi driver named Aaron was finishing his final ride before heading home. The streets were almost empty. Rain covered the windows, and the city felt unusually quiet. Then, he noticed a woman standing alone at a bus stop. She wore a long dark coat, her face hidden beneath wet hair. Aaron stopped beside her. "Need a ride?" The woman slowly opened the back door and sat inside without saying a word. Aaron checked the mirror. She was staring down at the floor, completely still. "Where to?" he asked. A few seconds later, she quietly gave him an address near the edge of the city. The ride felt wrong immediately. The inside of the car became colder, and every time Aaron looked in the mirror, the woman seemed slightly closer, even though she never moved. Then suddenly, the radio filled with loud static. A distorted voice whispered, "Don't look back." Aaron's hands tightened around the steering wheel. The woman in the back seat slowly lifted her head and smiled, but something about her face looked unnatural. Too pale, too empty. Aaron kept driving faster. Finally, they reached the address, an old house surrounded by darkness. The woman opened the door and stepped outside. Before closing it, she leaned toward Aaron and whispered, "You shouldn't have stopped." Then she disappeared into the darkness beside the house. Aaron immediately drove away, but after a few minutes, he noticed something terrifying. The back seat was wet, as if someone had been sitting there in soaked clothes. And lying on the seat was an old photograph. Aaron pulled over and looked at it carefully. It showed the same woman standing beside the exact same road. The photo was dated 30 years earlier, and written on the back were 4 words. Last seen getting inside. When Noah was 12 years old, he used to stay awake late every night playing games in his bedroom. His parents usually slept early, and after midnight, the entire house became completely silent. One night around 1:40 a.m., Noah heard something strange, a quiet whisper, coming from under his bed. At first, he thought it was his imagination, but then he heard it again, soft, slow, almost impossible to understand. Noah sat frozen beside the bed, listening carefully. Then the whisper became clearer. "Look under the bed." Noah immediately stepped away, his heart pounding. He turned on the bedroom light and checked the room carefully. Nothing there. No movement. No sound. Eventually, he convinced himself it was probably coming from outside. So he turned the lights off again and returned to bed. Minutes later, the whisper returned, this time louder. Someone is under the bed. Noah grabbed his phone flashlight with shaking hands and slowly pointed it toward the floor. Darkness. At first, he saw nothing. Then, two pale eyes opened beneath the bed, staring directly at him. Noah screamed and jumped backward, but the thing under the bed didn't move. It just kept watching him silently. Then suddenly, his bedroom door slowly opened behind him, and he heard his mother's voice whisper from the hallway, "Noah, don't look under the bed." Noah turned toward the door in confusion, because his mother was standing there, terrified, holding a kitchen knife. And before Noah could speak, she quietly said, "There's someone pretending to be me downstairs." Late one night, a college student named Ryan returned to his apartment building after studying with friends. The building was old, quiet, and almost completely empty after midnight. Ryan stepped inside the elevator and pressed the button for the 8th floor. The doors slowly closed. At first, everything seemed normal. Then suddenly, the elevator lights flickered once, twice, and the elevator stopped moving. Ryan sighed and pressed the emergency button. Nothing happened. No sound. No response. Then, the floor indicators suddenly changed. Instead of going up, the numbers began moving downward. 8, 7, 6, 5. Even though the elevator had never started moving again, Ryan felt his stomach tighten. The lights flickered harder now, and for a brief second, he saw another person standing beside him in the reflection of the elevator door. Tall, motionless. Ryan spun around instantly. Nobody there. Then the elevator suddenly jolted downward violently. The lights went out completely. Darkness filled the elevator. Ryan pulled out his phone flashlight with shaking hands. That's when he noticed something terrifying. Wet footprints, leading from the corner of the elevator, directly toward him. Then, a soft voice whispered beside his ear, "You weren't supposed to stop here." The elevator doors suddenly opened, but it wasn't the 8th floor. Ryan stared out in confusion. The hallway outside looked old. Rotting wallpaper, broken lights, and apartment doors covered in black stains. The floor number on the wall read 13. Ryan's building only had 8 floors. Then, one of the apartment doors slowly opened by itself, and something inside whispered, "Come closer." Ryan immediately slammed the closed door button repeatedly. The elevator doors shut, and seconds later, the elevator began working normally again. When Ryan finally reached the real 8th floor, he ran to the security office and asked about floor 13. The old guard went silent, then quietly said, "That floor was sealed years ago after a fire." Before Ryan could ask another question, the guard added, "And nobody survived."